Get out of the car, now!
What did I do?
Big, black, and dangerous, that's what you did.
Miles stepped out, hands up.
I'm a United States Marine.
A Marine! All I see is a dog off his leash.
He kicked Miles's feet apart.
Just look at my ID. I don't need your ID, I got eyes. And my eyes tell me exactly what you are.
People stared. Nobody stopped. Miles pressed his face against the cold hood, jaw tight, every muscle trained to fight. But he didn't move. What Deputy Grady had no way of knowing was that the man he just called a dog would have a 4-star general standing at attention for him before the night was over. To understand what happened on that road, you need to know who Miles Lancaster really is. Miles grew up in Ridgeway, Virginia. Small town, quiet streets, the kind of place where everybody knows your name, and your mama's name too. His mother, Dorothy, worked the cafeteria line at Ridgeway Elementary for 26 years. Hairnet on before dawn, home after dark. 3 boys raised on a cashier's wage and a stubborn refusal to ask anyone for help. Miles was the middle child, the quiet one. While his older brother chased trouble and his younger brother chased girls, Miles chased structure. He wanted rules. He wanted purpose. And he found both the day he walked into a Marine recruiter's office at 18 years old. He signed the papers the same week he graduated high school. Dorothy cried the whole drive to the bus station. She packed him a brown bag lunch like he was still heading to school. Turkey sandwich, apple, a napkin with "I'm proud of you" written in her handwriting. That napkin stayed in his wallet for 14 years. Boot camp broke a lot of guys. It didn't break Miles. He thrived. The discipline, the brotherhood, the clarity of knowing exactly who you are and what you stand for. He moved through the ranks like a man born for it. By 22, he had already deployed twice, once to Iraq and once to Afghanistan. But it was his 3rd deployment that changed everything. Helmand Province, August. 118 degrees in the shade. Miles's squad was pushing through a narrow valley when the first round cracked overhead. Then the second. Then the whole ridgeline lit up. 2 Marines went down in the first 10 seconds. Corporal James Whitaker took a round through his right leg. Private First Class Danny Ellis caught shrapnel across his back. Both were pinned in the open. No cover, no way to move. Enemy fire pouring in from 3 directions. Every man in that unit knew the math. Going out there meant dying. Miles went anyway. He sprinted 400 meters of open ground, bullets kicking up dirt at his feet. He grabbed Whitaker first, 220 pounds of dead weight, and dragged him to cover behind a crumbled wall. Then he went back, through the same kill zone, under the same fire, and pulled Ellis out too. But he wasn't done. While the rest of the squad laid down suppressive fire, Miles flanked the ridgeline alone. He moved through the rocks like a ghost, took out the enemy position with precision that his commanding officer later called the most extraordinary act of combat I have witnessed in 30 years of service. For that, Miles Lancaster received the Medal of Honor. The ceremony was at the White House. The president placed the pale blue ribbon around his neck while Dorothy stood in the front row, crying into the same hands that had packed that brown bag lunch years ago. A 4-star general, Raymond Caldwell, commanding general of Marine Forces Command, was the one who pinned Miles's medal. After the ceremony, Caldwell pulled him aside and said 5 words Miles never forgot. "You're the best of us." From that day on, Caldwell became more than a general. He became a mentor. A phone call on every birthday. A handwritten letter after every promotion. The kind of bond that only forms when one man watches another run into certain death and come back alive. Miles served 3 more years after the medal. Then he retired. Not because he was tired of the Corps, but because he felt a pull towards something else. The kids back in Ridgeway. The ones growing up the way he did. No father, not much money, and a world that had already decided what they were before they had a chance to show it. So he started volunteering. A youth mentorship program at the Haverford County Community Center. Every Tuesday and Thursday, he stood in front of a room of teenagers and taught them discipline, respect, and how to believe in themselves when nobody else did. That Friday evening, Miles had just finished a session with the kids. He had brought his Medal of Honor to show them. It sat now in its small black case in the glove compartment. He was driving home through Briarwood Estates, a wealthy, mostly white neighborhood, just to avoid the construction on Route 15. He was listening to an audiobook. Windows up, headlights on, speed limit exactly 35. And then the red and blue lights appeared in his mirror. Now, let's rewind just a little, because to understand how this stop went so wrong, you need to see it through both sides. Deputy Russell Grady had been with the Haverford County Sheriff's Department for 15 years, 41 years old, stocky build, buzz cut that hadn't changed since the academy, and a reputation that depended on who you asked. To the residents of Briarwood Estates, Grady was the guy who kept things safe. He drove through the neighborhood twice a shift. He waved at the old ladies. He parked his cruiser at the entrance so people could sleep easy at night. To the department's internal affairs office, Grady was a different story. 3 excessive force complaints in 7 years, every single one dismissed without external review. A pattern that anyone paying attention should have caught, but nobody was paying attention. Because Grady's supervisor, Sheriff Tom Whitfield, believed in one thing above all else: results. And Grady got results. Or at least that's what the numbers said. What the numbers didn't say was how he got them. Grady had a method. He called it instinct. Other people had a different word for it. He'd cruise neighborhoods after dark, watching for anything that felt off. And more often than not, what felt off to Russell Grady was a black or brown face in a place he didn't think it belonged. He never wrote that down, of course. On paper, it was always something else: a broken taillight, a suspicious lane change, a vehicle matching a description. Tonight, the excuse was even thinner than usual. Briarwood Estates had been dealing with a string of car break-ins over the past 2 weeks. Residents were rattled. The neighborhood Facebook group was on fire with posts about suspicious strangers and demands for more patrols. Sheriff Whitfield told Grady to increase his presence in the area. So when Grady saw a black Ford F-150 entering Briarwood from the South Access Road at dusk, driven by a black man in a gray hoodie, his radio was in his hand before his brain finished the thought. "I got a visual on a suspicious vehicle," Grady said into the receiver. "Black male, dark truck, entering Briarwood from the south. Let's light him up." On the other end of that radio was Deputy Kevin Holt, 27 years old, 2 years on the force, lean build, nervous energy that he tried to hide by mimicking Grady's swagger. Holt had been paired with Grady for 6 months now, and in that time he'd learned one unspoken rule: don't question Russ. Holt pulled his cruiser behind Grady's. The 2 vehicles boxed in the black truck. Lights flashing, sirens off, the kind of stop that looks routine from the outside. But nothing about this was routine. Miles saw the lights in his rearview mirror. He didn't panic. He didn't speed up. He did what 14 years of military training had drilled into him. He controlled the situation by controlling himself. He pulled over to the right, turned off the engine, turned on the interior light so the officer could see inside the cab, placed both hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2, and waited. His heart rate didn't even change. He had been in ambushes in Helmand Province. A traffic stop in Virginia wasn't going to rattle him. Grady approached from the driver's side. Holt hung back on the passenger's side, flashlight sweeping the interior of the truck through the window. Standard positioning. But Grady's hand was already on his holster. Not standard. Grady didn't introduce himself, didn't state his name, didn't state the reason for the stop. He just shined his flashlight directly into Miles's face and held it there. The light was blinding. Miles squinted but didn't raise a hand to block it. He knew better. "License and registration," Grady said. "No, sir. No good evening. Just a command." "Yes, officer," Miles said. "I'm going to reach into my back pocket for my wallet. Slowly." "You bet you will." Slowly. Miles pulled out his wallet, extracted his Virginia driver's license and his registration from the visor above, handed both through the window. Grady looked at the license, looked at Miles, looked back at the license. He held it under his flashlight like he was searching for a forgery. Everything was clean. Miles Lancaster, age 34, Ridgeway, Virginia. No warrants, no priors. The registration matched the truck. The truck matched the plates. There was nothing here. Any reasonable officer would have handed the documents back and said, "Have a good night." Grady did not hand them back. "Miles Lancaster," he read out loud, like the name was a joke. "So what are you doing in Briarwood, Miles?" "Taking a shortcut, officer. The construction on Route 15. "A shortcut." Grady cut him off. He leaned into the window frame. Miles could smell coffee and chewing tobacco on his breath. Through Briarwood, after dark, in a hoodie. Miles said nothing to that, because there was nothing to say. The implication was clear, and responding to it would only make things worse. Grady held the silence for a long moment. Then he keyed his radio and called dispatch to run the plates. The response came back in under a minute. Clean. Registered owner, Miles Lancaster. No stolen vehicle reports. No flags. Grady stared at the radio like it had betrayed him. Holt appeared at the passenger window. He tapped the glass lightly. "Plates are clean, Russ. Registration matches. We good?" Grady didn't look at him. He was still staring at Miles. The flashlight hadn't moved from his face. "No," Grady said quietly. "We're not good." He straightened up, adjusted his belt. Then he said the words that turned a bad stop into a disaster. "Step out of the vehicle." Miles's hands were still on the wheel. "Officer, may I ask why? My documents are in order. I haven't committed a violation." "You're being asked to exit the vehicle as part of an active investigation. Step out. Now." "What investigation, sir?" Grady leaned back in, close enough that Miles could feel the heat off his skin. "You want to play lawyer with me, boy? I said get out." Miles took a slow breath. In through the nose, out through the mouth. A technique he had taught himself in a foxhole in Fallujah when mortar rounds were landing 50 meters away and panic meant death. He opened the door, stepped out slowly, hands visible at all times. The evening air hit his skin. Cool for October. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once, then went quiet. The red and blue lights from both cruisers splashed across the manicured lawns of Briarwood Estates like paint thrown at a clean wall. Grady pointed to the hood of the truck. "Hands on the hood. Spread your feet." Miles complied. The metal was still warm from the engine. He placed his palms flat, felt the heat seep into his fingers. A silver Lexus rolled past slowly. An elderly white couple inside. The woman in the passenger seat craned her neck to look. The man driving stared straight ahead. They didn't stop. Grady waved them along without looking. "Nothing to see here, folks. Routine stop." Routine. That word echoed through the October air as Miles Lancaster, Medal of Honor recipient, decorated combat veteran, mentor to at-risk youth, stood spread eagle against his own truck in a neighborhood where his only crime was existing. Behind him, Holt shifted his weight from one foot to the other. He opened his mouth like he was about to say something, then closed it. And this was just the beginning. What happened next took less than 15 minutes. But for Miles Lancaster, standing against that truck with his palms flat on the hood, It felt like an eternity. Grady circled behind him slowly, boots crunching on the gravel shoulder, taking his time, the way a man does when he knows he has all the power and wants you to feel it. "So here's what I think," Grady said. His voice was casual, almost friendly. That was the worst part. "I think you're not taking a shortcut. I think you're scouting. We've had break-ins all over this neighborhood the past 2 weeks, and then you show up. Big guy, dark truck, after dark, wearing a hoodie." "I'm driving home from a community center," Miles said. "I volunteer there. I work with kids." "You work with kids?" Grady repeated it like it was the most ridiculous thing he'd ever heard. "Doing what? Teaching them how to case houses?" Miles didn't respond. He stared at the hood of his truck, at the reflection of the red and blue lights rippling across the black paint. He focused on his breathing. Steady. Controlled. Grady leaned in close behind him. "I'm going to search your vehicle." "On what grounds, officer?" "I smell marijuana." There it was. The oldest trick in the playbook. 3 words that gave a cop permission to tear apart your entire life without a warrant, without evidence, without anything except his own word against yours. "There is no marijuana in my vehicle," Miles said. "I don't use drugs. I never have." "Well, my nose says different, and last time I checked, my nose has a badge." Grady walked to the truck and started his search. He wasn't looking for anything. That was obvious from the way he moved. He wasn't careful. He wasn't systematic. He was making a mess on purpose. He pulled Miles's gym bag from behind the seat and threw it onto the road. The zipper burst open. A towel, a water bottle, and a change of clothes spilled across the asphalt. Grady stepped on the shirt as he walked past it. He grabbed Miles's jacket from the passenger seat and tossed it into the dirt, rifled through the center console, threw a phone charger and a pack of gum on the floor, opened the back seat storage and dumped a box of supplies, markers, name tags, printed worksheets from the youth mentorship program, across the back seat like they were garbage. Miles watched over his shoulder. Every item that hit the ground was something he had packed that morning with care. Every toss, every throw, every careless slam was a message. You don't matter. Your things don't matter. You are nothing. Holt stood beside Miles, silent, his flashlight pointed at the ground. After a long pause, he spoke quietly, almost a whisper. "So, Marine, huh? What unit?" Miles glanced at him. "2nd Battalion, 6th Marines." "How many deployments?" 4. 2 Iraq, 2 Afghanistan. Holt nodded slowly, his lips pressed together like he wanted to say something else, something bigger. But the words didn't come. Inside the truck, Grady had reached the glove compartment. He popped it open, pulled out the vehicle manual, a small flashlight, a tire pressure gauge, and then a small black case, about the size of a hardcover book, heavier than it looked. Grady held it up, turned it over in his hands, then flipped it open. Inside, resting on a bed of dark blue velvet, was the Medal of Honor. A 5-pointed gold star hanging from a pale blue ribbon with 13 white stars. The most sacred military decoration in the United States of America. Fewer than 3,500 people in the entire history of the nation have ever received it. Grady stared at it. He didn't recognize it. He had no idea what he was holding. "What the hell is this?" Miles turned his head, saw the case in Grady's hand, and for the first time that night, something shifted behind his eyes. Not anger. Something deeper. Something that lived in the place where a man keeps the things he would die for. "That is the Medal of Honor, Deputy. It was presented to me by the President of the United States." Grady looked at the medal, looked at Miles, then back at the medal, and laughed. The president, right. He held the case up toward Holt. Hey, Holt, come look at this. Our friend here says the president gave him a little necklace. Holt took one look at the case. His face went pale. Because unlike Grady, Holt recognized it. He had seen one in a glass case at the Marine Corps Museum in Quantico when he was 12 years old on a field trip. He remembered the tour guide saying that you could count on your fingers how many living recipients there were. Russ? Holt said. His voice was tight. Russ, I think that's real. Real? Grady snorted. He snapped the case shut. This is some kind of gang medallion, probably worth $50 at a pawn shop. He tossed the case back into the glove compartment. It bounced off the edge and fell onto the floor of the truck. Miles closed his eyes. The Medal of Honor. The same medal the president had placed around his neck. The same medal his mother had touched with trembling fingers while tears ran down her cheeks. The same medal that represented the two men he carried through gunfire and the enemy position he destroyed alone. Tossed into the footwell of his truck like a piece of junk. Grady walked back to Miles, got right in his face, so close that Miles could count the broken blood vessels in the whites of his eyes. Here's what I think. I think you stole this truck. I think you're casing this neighborhood. And I think that medal is as fake as your little Marine story. I would like to speak with your supervisor. You're looking at him. I'm the senior officer on shift tonight, so whatever you think is going to save you, it's not coming. Grady grabbed Miles's arm, twisted it behind his back, shoved him harder against the truck. Miles's cheek hit the metal. Stop resisting, Grady barked. Miles wasn't resisting. His body was completely still. His arms were limp. His legs were steady. There was no resistance. But Grady needed that word for the report he was already writing in his head. Russ, Holt stepped forward. He's not resisting. He's not doing anything. Maybe we should just cuff him. Holt froze. I said cuff him, Holt, now. Holt's hands were shaking. He pulled his handcuffs from his belt, stepped forward, looked at Miles. Miles met his eyes. Didn't say a word, didn't plead, didn't beg. Just looked at him with the kind of stillness that only comes from a man who has faced real death and survived. The cuffs clicked around his wrists, cold steel against warm skin. Grady grabbed Miles by the shoulder and walked him to the back of the cruiser, opened the door, pushed his head down. Miles sat in the back seat. The plastic bench was hard. The cage separating the front from the back smelled like sweat and disinfectant. Grady slammed the door shut. Through the window, Miles could see his truck. The door still open, his belongings scattered across the road, the gym bag in the dirt, the worksheets from the kids' program blowing gently in the evening breeze. He looked down at his wrists, at the handcuffs. He had worn these hands raw, pulling 2 Marines out of a kill zone, and now they were locked in steel in the back of a police car in his own country. Grady leaned against his cruiser and started writing up the charges: resisting arrest, suspicious activity, possession of a suspected stolen item. All of it fabricated. Every single word. But here's the thing. The worst night of Deputy Grady's life hadn't even started yet. Because Miles Lancaster still had one phone call, and the number he was about to dial was going to bring something to that station that Russell Grady could never talk his way out of. At the Haverford County Sheriff's Station, Miles Lancaster sat on a metal bench inside a holding cell. His wrists were red from the cuffs. The fluorescent lights above buzzed with a faint, constant hum that drilled into the silence. A deputy he hadn't seen before slid a phone across the counter. "You get one call." Miles picked up the phone. He didn't dial a lawyer. He didn't dial his mother. He scrolled to a contact saved under a single word. General. The line rang twice. Lancaster. The voice on the other end was deep, measured, the kind of voice that had commanded thousands of Marines across 3 decades of service. Sir, I'm at the Haverford County Sheriff's Station. I've been arrested. A pause. 3 full seconds of silence. When you've known a man like Raymond Caldwell long enough, you learn that his silences say more than most people's speeches. Arrested for what? Driving through a white neighborhood, sir. They searched my truck without cause. They found the medal. Called it a gang medallion. I've been charged with resisting arrest and suspicious activity. Neither happened. Another silence. Longer this time. Miles could hear Caldwell breathing through his nose. Slow. Controlled. The way a man breathes when he is containing something enormous. Don't say another word to anyone. Not one word. I'm on my way. The line went dead. Lieutenant General Raymond Caldwell, 4 stars, Commanding General of Marine Forces Command, based at Naval Station Norfolk, was 90 minutes away. But tonight he happened to be closer. He had attended a veterans fundraiser in Charlottesville that evening. He was already in the car heading back to Norfolk. Haverford County was barely 45 minutes from his current location. He told his driver to turn around. Back at the station, time moved like cold honey. Miles sat in the holding cell with his hands on his knees. He didn't speak, didn't ask for water, didn't complain. The deputies at the front desk kept glancing at him the way people glance at something they don't quite understand. Grady was at his desk filling out paperwork, confident, relaxed. He cracked a joke to another deputy about the Marine he picked up in Briarwood. Guy had some kind of fake medal in his glove box, probably got it off eBay. The deputy laughed. Holt, sitting 3 desks away, did not. 48 minutes later, headlights swept across the front windows of the station. A black government SUV pulled into the lot, then a second vehicle behind it. Both doors opened at the same time. General Raymond Caldwell stepped out. Full dress uniform, dark blue jacket with gold buttons, 4 silver stars gleaming on each shoulder, a chest full of ribbons, row after row of them, representing 40 years of service to the United States of America. His cover sat perfectly on his head. His shoes reflected the parking lot lights. 2 Marine aides flanked him, both in dress uniforms, both walking in perfect step. Caldwell pushed through the front door of the station like he owned the building. The glass rattled in the frame. The deputy at the front desk, a young woman who had been scrolling through her phone, looked up and froze. Her chair rolled backward and hit the wall. She stood so fast she nearly knocked over her coffee. Every head in the station turned. Grady looked up from his paperwork. The pen slipped from his fingers and rolled off the desk. He didn't pick it up. Caldwell didn't look at anyone, didn't speak to anyone. He walked straight toward the holding area. One of his aides stepped ahead and presented credentials to the desk sergeant. Lieutenant General Raymond Caldwell, United States Marine Corps. You are holding one of my Marines. Bring him out. Now. The desk sergeant didn't argue, didn't ask for paperwork, didn't verify a thing. He practically ran to the holding cell. Miles was brought out 30 seconds later, still in handcuffs. Caldwell stopped walking. He looked at Miles's wrists, at the red marks where the cuffs had pressed into his skin for the past 2 hours. His jaw tightened. A vein pulsed at his temple. Then he looked at Miles's face. Miles stood straight, shoulders back. Even in handcuffs, he carried himself like what he was, a Marine. And then it happened. General Raymond Caldwell, 4-star general, one of the highest-ranking officers in the entire United States military, drew himself to full height, squared his shoulders, and raised his right hand to his brow. He saluted Miles Lancaster first. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, this is almost unheard of. A 4-star general does not salute a retired staff sergeant. It doesn't happen. Rank flows upward. Lower ranks salute higher ranks. That is how it works. Always. Except for one exception, the Medal of Honor. By sacred military tradition, every service member, regardless of rank, regardless of stars, regardless of anything, salutes a Medal of Honor recipient first. It is the highest gesture of respect in the armed forces. Generals have done it for privates. Admirals have done it for corporals. It is not about rank. It is about honor. And in that fluorescent-lit police station in Haverford County, Virginia, a 4-star general was saluting a man in handcuffs. The room went dead silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that falls when every person in a room realizes at the exact same moment that something has gone terribly, catastrophically wrong. Grady's face lost all color. His lips parted, but nothing came out. Caldwell held the salute for 3 full seconds. Then he lowered his hand, turned slowly, and looked directly at Grady. Who is responsible for this? Grady stepped forward. He had no choice. Every eye in the station was on him. "Sir, I conducted a routine traffic stop based on—" "I didn't ask for a speech," Caldwell said. His voice was quiet. That was what made it terrifying. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't raising his voice. He was speaking the way a man speaks when he has already decided what's going to happen and is simply walking through the steps. I asked who is responsible. I am, sir. Deputy Russell Grady. But if you'll let me explain— Explain. Caldwell repeated the word like he was tasting something rotten. You want to explain why a Medal of Honor recipient is standing in your station in handcuffs? There were break-ins in the neighborhood. He matched the— Matched what description? What description was broadcast? What dispatch call described a black male in a black Ford F-150? Grady opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out, because there was no description. There was no dispatch call. There was nothing except a black man driving through a white neighborhood. And everyone in that room now knew it. Caldwell turned to the desk sergeant. I want his body camera footage. Both officers, every second. And I want it now. The footage was pulled within 10 minutes. They played it on a monitor in the sergeant's office. Caldwell stood with his arms crossed. His 2 aides stood behind him. The desk sergeant sat at the keyboard. Grady stood in the corner like a man watching his own funeral. The footage showed everything. It showed Grady approaching the truck with his hand already on his holster before a single word was spoken. It showed him shining the flashlight into Miles's face without identifying himself. It showed the lack of any stated reason for the stop. It showed Grady saying, "Big, black, and dangerous." It showed the fabricated marijuana claim. It showed him tossing Miles's belongings onto the road, stepping on his shirt, dumping the youth program supplies across the back seat. It showed him opening the Medal of Honor case, calling it a gang medallion, and throwing it back into the glove compartment like a piece of trash. It showed him shoving Miles against the truck. It showed him yelling, "Stop resisting," while Miles stood completely still. It showed him ordering Holt to apply handcuffs to a man who had not committed a single crime. Every second of it. Recorded, time-stamped. Undeniable. Caldwell watched the entire thing without moving. When it ended, he stood in silence for 5 seconds. Then he turned to Grady. You called the Medal of Honor a gang medallion. It wasn't a question. Grady said nothing. This man charged an enemy position alone in Helmand Province. He carried 2 wounded Marines across 400 meters of open ground under fire. The President of the United States shook his hand, and you put him face down on the hood of his own truck and called him a dog. Grady's voice cracked. I didn't know who he was. Caldwell took 1 step toward him. Just 1. But it closed the distance enough that Grady had to look up. You didn't need to know who he was. You needed to follow the law. And you didn't. Not because you couldn't, because you didn't want to. By now, Sheriff Tom Whitfield had arrived. He had been called at home by his panicking staff. He came through the door in civilian clothes, khakis and a polo shirt, looking like a man who had just been told his house was on fire. Whitfield was 58, career politician. He had run the department for 12 years on a simple formula: keep the crime stats low, keep the complaints quiet, and keep getting reelected. Grady was his best producer. 3 excessive force complaints in 7 years. Whitfield had buried every single one. But there was no burying this. Whitfield looked at the footage, looked at Caldwell, looked at the 4 stars on his shoulders, and made the fastest decision of his career. Deputy Grady, you are suspended without pay, effective immediately, pending a full internal investigation. Turn in your badge and your weapon. Grady stared at him. Tom, come on, you know me. 15 years, badge, weapon. Now. Grady's hands trembled as he unclipped his badge from his belt. He set it on the desk, then his service weapon. The metal clinked against the wood like a period at the end of a sentence. Holt was suspended too. Caldwell noted, and the footage confirmed, that Holt had hesitated multiple times, that he had questioned Grady, that he had recognized the metal. But he had still applied the cuffs, and in the eyes of the law, hesitation without action is just silence with extra steps. All charges against Miles were dropped on the spot. Every single one, erased like they never existed, because they never should have. Miles walked out of the station beside General Caldwell. The night air hit his face. Cool, clean. He stopped on the sidewalk and took a breath. A real breath. The first one in hours that didn't taste like disinfectant and fluorescent light. Caldwell put a hand on his shoulder. You handled that with more discipline than most generals I've ever known. Miles was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I just kept thinking about the kids at the center. What do I tell them on Monday? Caldwell looked at him. You tell them the truth, and then we make sure this never happens to anyone else. General Caldwell didn't go home that night. He went to work. By Sunday morning, before most people in Haverford County had finished their first cup of coffee, Caldwell had made 3 phone calls. The first was to the Marine Corps Inspector General. The second was to a contact at the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. The third was to a military attorney at Naval Station Norfolk who specialized in civil rights cases. The wheels started turning before the sun came up. But it wasn't just the military machine that was moving. Someone inside the station, to this day no one knows who, copied the body camera footage and sent it to a journalist. Her name was Dana Prescott, 36 years old, investigative reporter for the Richmond Chronicle. She had spent her entire career covering police misconduct cases in Central Virginia, and she had learned to recognize a bombshell the moment it landed in her inbox. She watched the footage once, then again, then a third time. By the 4th viewing, she had already written her headline. The story broke Monday morning, front page, above the fold. The Richmond Chronicle ran it with a still frame from the body cam, Grady's hand pressing Miles's face against the hood of the truck. The headline read, Medal of Honor recipient arrested for driving through white neighborhood. By Monday afternoon, the story had been picked up by every major outlet in the country: CNN, MS, NBC, Fox News, The Washington Post, The New York Times. All of them running the same clip, all of them landing on the same moment. The gang medallion line. That was the one that broke the internet. A deputy sheriff holding the Medal of Honor, the highest military decoration in the United States, and calling it a gang medallion. Calling it a $50 pawn shop trinket. The clip played on loop across every cable news channel for 72 straight hours. Social media turned it into a wildfire. Hashtags trended for days. Veterans were furious. Military families were furious. Civil rights organizations were furious. Even people who had never thought twice about policing reform watched that clip and felt something shift inside their chest. By Wednesday, the Department of Justice had officially opened a federal investigation into the Haverford County Sheriff's Department, not just into Grady, into the entire department. And what they found was worse than anyone expected. Federal investigators pulled 18 months of traffic stop data from the department's records. They cross-referenced every stop with demographic information, dispatch logs, and body camera footage. The numbers told a story that no amount of excuses could explain away. Deputy Russell Grady had conducted 214 traffic stops in the past 18 months. Of those 214 stops, 167, 78%, involved Black or Latino drivers, in a county where the minority population was only 22%. But it wasn't just Grady. Investigators found that the 3 prior excessive force complaints against him had all been filed by Black men. All 3 had been dismissed internally by Sheriff Whitfield without an external review. In 2 of the cases, the complainants had been pressured by department staff to withdraw their complaints. In the 3rd, the paperwork had simply disappeared. Dashboard camera footage from other stops showed a pattern so consistent it was almost mechanical. The same language, the same tactics, the same fabricated justifications. Smelled marijuana, suspicious behavior, matched a description. The same words over and over, used on different people who had only one thing in common. 2 other deputies were implicated in covering for Grady's behavior. They had been present during stops where Grady used excessive force and had filed supporting reports that contradicted the camera footage. Both were placed on administrative leave. The investigation took 4 months. The indictment took 2 weeks after that. Deputy Russell Grady was arrested at his home on a Tuesday morning, 6:30 a.m. Federal marshals at his front door. Neighbors watching through their blinds as he was led to a black SUV in handcuffs, the same kind of handcuffs he had put on Miles Lancaster. The charges were severe. Deprivation of civil rights under color of law, a federal offense under 18 U.S.C. Section 242. Filing a false police report, unlawful search and seizure, assault. The trial lasted 9 days. Grady's defense attorney argued reasonable suspicion, the neighborhood break-ins, the increased patrols, the hoodie. He painted a picture of a dedicated officer making a split-second judgment call in a high-crime environment. The prosecution dismantled it in less than an hour. They showed the body cam footage. They showed the dispatch logs. No description matching Miles had ever been broadcast. They showed the traffic stop data. They showed the buried complaints. They showed that Grady had a pattern stretching back years, and that the system designed to catch it had looked the other way every single time. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty. All counts. Grady stood in the courtroom as the verdict was read. His wife sat in the gallery behind him. She was crying. Grady was not. He stared straight ahead with the expression of a man who still, even now, could not quite believe that consequences had finally found him. The sentence came 2 weeks later. 4 years in federal prison. A permanent ban from law enforcement anywhere in the United States. And a spot on a federal database that would follow him for the rest of his life. Sheriff Tom Whitfield resigned 3 days after the verdict. He held a press conference that lasted 4 minutes. He thanked the community for their support. He did not apologize. He did not mention Miles Lancaster by name. He walked away from the podium and never held public office again. The DOJ investigation named Whitfield as a systemic failure, a leader who prioritized statistics over civil rights and enabled a culture of unchecked racial profiling. He was not criminally charged, but he faced a civil lawsuit from Miles that would shadow him for years. Deputy Kevin Holt was not criminally charged. The footage showed his hesitation, his attempts to intervene, his recognition of the medal. But he was terminated from the department. In a public statement released through his attorney, Holt said 7 sentences that would be quoted in newspapers across the country. "I should have done more. I knew what was happening was wrong. I saw it. I heard it, and I didn't stop it. I told myself it wasn't my place, but it was. It was exactly my place. And I'll carry that failure for the rest of my life." Miles Lancaster filed a civil rights lawsuit against Haverford County. It was settled out of court for $2.8 million. He didn't keep most of it. He donated a third to expand the youth mentorship program at the community center. A third went into a scholarship fund named after his mother, the Dorothy Lancaster Future Leaders Scholarship, for first-generation college students from Ridgeway, Virginia. The rest he split between a veterans support organization and a legal defense fund for victims of police misconduct. 3 months after the settlement, Miles received a letter on congressional letterhead. He was being invited to testify before a House subcommittee on policing reform. He said yes. Miles sat at a long table in a wood-paneled hearing room in Washington, D.C. Cameras everywhere. Microphones everywhere. Members of Congress lined up behind raised desks like judges in a courtroom, and beside him, in full dress uniform with 4 stars on his shoulders, sat General Raymond Caldwell. Miles spoke for 12 minutes. No notes, no prepared statement. Just a man telling the truth in a calm, steady voice that had once called out orders under enemy fire. He told them about the stop, about the search, about the gang medallion, about sitting in a holding cell in handcuffs while a deputy joked about his medal at a desk 20 feet away. Then he said the line that would be replayed 10 million times. "I didn't need the Medal of Honor to deserve basic dignity. No one does. But the fact that I had one, and it still wasn't enough, should tell you everything you need to know about where we are." The room was silent. One congresswoman wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She didn't try to hide it. So where are they now? Miles Lancaster still lives in Ridgeway, Virginia. Same town he grew up in. Same streets his mother walked to work every morning before dawn. But things are different now. The youth mentorship program he started at the Haverford County Community Center didn't just survive what happened that night. It grew. What was once a Tuesday and Thursday after-school session in a single room is now a full program running across 3 counties. 62 kids enrolled last semester. Miles teaches them the same things he always has: discipline, respect, accountability, how to stand tall when the world is pushing you down. But now, he teaches them one more thing. He teaches them their rights. Every new kid who walks through the door gets a small card, laminated, wallet-sized. On one side, it lists what to do during a traffic stop: hands visible, interior light on, ask for badge number, request a supervisor. On the other side, a single sentence in bold print: "You deserve to be treated with dignity. That is not a privilege. It is the law." Miles also speaks now, not just at the community center, at military events, at police academies, at high schools and college campuses across Virginia. He tells his story the same way every time: calm, measured, without bitterness. People always ask him how he does that, how he can stand in front of a room full of law enforcement cadets and not be angry. His answer is always the same: anger is easy. Change is hard. I'm not interested in easy. The Dorothy Lancaster Future Leaders Scholarship awarded its first 3 grants last spring. 2 went to young women from Ridgeway. 1 went to a young man from Haverford County who wants to study criminal justice. Dorothy came to the ceremony. She wore her best dress and cried through the whole thing, just like she did the day the president put that medal around her son's neck. Russell Grady is serving his sentence at a federal correctional facility in Cumberland, Maryland. He filed 1 appeal. It was denied. His wife filed for divorce 6 months into his sentence. His pension was revoked. The name that once carried weight in Haverford County now carries something else entirely. He will be eligible for release in 3 years. But the federal database will follow him forever. He will never wear a badge again. He will never carry a service weapon again. He will never again have the power to stand over another human being and say, "I am the law." That power is gone, and it is not coming back. Kevin Holt left law enforcement the day he was terminated. He didn't fight it. He didn't give interviews. He disappeared from public life for almost a year. When he resurfaced, he was enrolled in a social work program at Virginia Commonwealth University. He graduated last May. Today, Holt works for a community policing nonprofit that trains officers on de-escalation, implicit bias, and intervention, the act of stepping in when a fellow officer crosses the line. He leads a workshop called The Cost of Silence. He opens every session the same way. "I was the guy who said nothing. I want to make sure you're not." Sheriff Tom Whitfield's replacement was elected in a special election 4 months after his resignation. Her name is Angela Davis Moore. She is the first black sheriff in Haverford County history. On her first day, she implemented 3 changes: mandatory body camera activation with no override, an independent civilian oversight board with subpoena power, and a zero-tolerance policy for racial profiling with automatic external review of all complaints. General Raymond Caldwell retired the following year, 41 years of service. At his retirement ceremony, he stood before a room full of Marines and said the words that would become the most shared quote from this entire story. "The bravest thing I ever saw wasn't on a battlefield. It was a man in handcuffs who kept his dignity when the people sworn to protect him tried to take it away." So here's my question for you. If you were Kevin Holt, standing right there on that road, watching it happen in real time, knowing deep in your gut that it was wrong, would you have spoken up? Would you have stepped between your partner and that man? Or would you have done what Holt did? Stayed quiet, followed orders, and spent the rest of your life wishing you hadn't? There's no easy answer, and that's exactly why I'm asking. Drop yours in the comments. I want to hear it. I want to hear what you would have done, what you think should have been done, and what you think still needs to change. And if this story hit you, if it made you feel something, do me a favor. Like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you haven't, because the more people see stories like this, the harder it becomes to look away. And looking away is how we got here in the first place.
A four-star general saluted a man in handcuffs. That single moment told you everything about who the real criminal was in that station. Mayor Lancaster led for the country. He carried dying men through gunfire. The president played the highest military honor around his neck. And a deputy with a flashlight and a bias revealed all of it to nothing in under 15 minutes. That's not a broken system making a mistake. That's the system working exactly the way it was designed to, until someone with 4 stars on his shoulders walked in and broke the silence. Dignity shouldn't require a general to show up and confirm it. It shouldn't need a medal to prove it exists. The moment we need credentials to be treated like human beings, we already lost the plot. So here's what I can start thinking about. What the honor actually means is the people sworn to protect it can even recognize it. And what point the staying quiet stop being cautioned and start becoming the very thing you swore you'll never be. And how many people tonight are sitting where miles at with no general coming? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this story hit you, subscribe, say it. Because silence only works when nobody watching. Let's make sure they are watching.